Mr. Zine has things to do, so we're going to get going.
Thank you very much.
I'm joined by Councilman Reyes, Councilman Cardenas, Councilman Zine, and Councilman Smith, Chairman. With your approval, members, we'll take 2, 3, 4, and 6 as consent, with the amendment on number 4 as the items presented in the recommendations for amendment by the department. So if you have anything you want to hear on those, we'll call them special. Otherwise,
I got questions on 2.
no cards in them. Okay, we'll call number 2.
And I have questions on 6.
And numbers
Questions on 2 and 6.
2 and 6, so we'll take 3 and 4 then as consent. Anyone else? Okay. Mr. White, 2 and 4 will be consent with the recommendations and amendments added on number 4 by the department. Let's hear number 2 then.
Item 2, Board of Police Commissioners and CO reports relative to a police department application for a 2009 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Program Grant Award in the amount of $1,605,274 from the DOJ.
Good morning, Jason Kling, City Administrator Officer. The report in front of you was a request from the Police Department to retroactively submit for a grant application of $1.6 million for the 2009 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Program from the United States Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Assistance, for the period of April 1st, 2009 through September 30th, 2011. In the original report, we had requested the funds from BGA, but we were not told how much we were going to get. Since the release of our initial report, the department was told that they were going to get $338,399 as their grant award, and we released an amended report to let council know that. I'm sure council members are going to ask the question of, we asked for a specific amount of money, but we got substantially less than what we asked for, and that's typically what happens. The grantor does not know how much money they're going to have allocated for the program until after they get all the requests in. So we always ask for everything we possibly can under the formula, and then we typically get within the top 5 for the nation as in terms of grant awards. For this grant award, the only grantee who got more money was the state of California, the state of New York, and New York City. So we did 4th best in the nation on this grant.
How were we compared to New York City?
New York City received a grant award of $396,000, so they got about $60,000 more than us.
Yeah, big deal. Okay. Mr. Zine.
What's the replacement process in the department? The number of years a vest is in use before it gets replaced?
5 years.
Okay, where are we on that replacement program?
The replacement program is stacked. So they're replacing anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 vests per year. And they do that every year.
Are we caught up with the officers and detectives so they're current? We don't have a backlog of vests that need replacement?
We don't have a backlog, to my knowledge. We're in the process of purchasing 400 vests through the end of this fiscal year.
Okay.
And then we have another 1,000 vests that will be paid for through this grant program.
But as far as the distribution to the officers and detectives, that every 5 years they're supposed to get a new vest.
To my knowledge, there's no backlog at the moment.
So the backlog, there was a backlog at one time. So you're saying that they've caught up and they're doing the distribution so everyone's current?
To my knowledge, they have.
Okay, to your knowledge, but is that actual fact?
I will find out for you.
Pardon me?
I will find out for you.
Please do. I want to make sure that we're doing what we need to do for the officer's safety. Okay, thank you. That's all I have on 2.
Okay. Mr. Cardenas? No, you've got to skip. Okay. Mr. Reyes?
I'm fine.
All right, then we have a motion to approve the report.
Yes.
So moved and seconded. We'll forward that to council to approve the committee. Thank you very much. Item number 6.
Item 6, Board of Police Commissioners and CO reports relative to a donation from the Los Angeles Police Foundation of consultant services valued at $20,000 for use by the Police Department's grants unit.
Matt Crawford, Office of the CAO. As the clerk stated, this is a donation from the Police Foundation of consultant services.
Yeah.
The consultant works, as she has been doing, with the grants unit of the department in developing grant applications and strong applications for additional grants. I believe the department's here to speak if you have any additional questions.
Mr. Zine, you call it?
We talked about this last Public Safety meeting regarding grants. The police department has a grant section, the mayor's office has a grant section, all these offices have grant sections. And the concern is, are we going to consolidate any of these and use these dollars, consultant services, in a better fashion than what we're doing with the grants that are spread throughout many departments?
We're certainly looking at possible consolidations in just about every city function right now. Certainly grants administration is one that we are looking at.
You know how many grant sections we have throughout the city?
Off the top of my head, no.
A lot.
Every department has at least one person assigned to it.
Exactly. And there's 40 departments, that's 40 people. That's a lot of extra people. And if this consultant services is going to be given to the police department, they'll have some inside information that these other departments won't. The concern I have is that we use grants to the fullest extent, but if we have one centrally controlled grant section for the whole city, it seems a lot more efficient than the way it is now. So it just triggered when I saw this $20,000, which is a great contribution, but that doesn't help the other departments who may be stumbling to try and get grants for their different projects.
Agreed.
That not being in front of us today, do you have any questions on this?
Well, no, it's,
We're taking that off actually today in the FSR and Budget Committee. And
Grants?
there is consolidation.
because just that aspect of the $20,000, the consultant service, it'd be nice if they could consult everybody to help them with their grants, and not just the police department. But obviously, if you're going to take it up in the discussion, there needs to be some more consolidation with that.
Yeah, there is a recommendation to consolidate some of those units now.
Okay. That's all I had on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, okay, that goes for the recommendation of the committee. That takes us back to 1 and 5 then. Number 1.
Item 1, motion Zion Smith instructing the police department to report relative to the status of the digital in-car video camera system.
Good morning. My name is Maggie Goodrich, and I am the commanding officer of the newly created Information Technology Bureau. I was previously, for the last 3 years, the commanding officer of Teams 2 for the department, and was brought on there to help implement that system when it was having trouble under the consent decree. With Chief Beck coming in as our chief of police, he decided to make some changes, as you've all seen, with the reorganization of the department, and part of that was to designate me to be commanding officer of the Information Technology Bureau. One of the first things that Chief Beck did was actually ask me to make in-car video my top priority, to get it, to figure out what the issues are, get them resolved, get us back on track, and have a plan in place to get this implemented as quickly as possible. In response to the motion that Councilmember Zine made, I'd like to just walk through the points there and briefly let you know what I've done so far. First, as far as details on progress of the IBM project contract, I've walked through that contract and walked through what deliverables we've seen so far to date. To date, all of the South Bureau police stations have been installed with all of the required equipment to transport and store all of the video that is collected, and to also retrieve that video. Approximately 300 patrol units have been installed with the in-car video systems. There are central servers in City Hall East with the long-term storage that is all fully installed. And currently, the senior lead officers in Southeast are doing field testing for us of the equipment. In regard to a comprehensive plan to correct any errors that have delayed the project thus far, the first thing that I did was put new team leads in place on this project. And I focused on 2 areas, one being the technical requirements and having a technical lead on the project, but 2, to ensure that I had a sworn person to lead the project from an operational perspective, to ensure that not only are the technical needs of the system met and of the contract met, but also operationally that this is going to work for the officer in the car, and obviously most importantly, not hinder an officer's daily routine, but be a tool that will help them in their daily routine. The other thing I've done is worked with IBM to designate new staff for IBM to be added to the project. They've added an additional technical resource, and they've added an additional project manager, as well as I escalated the project up through the executive chain through IBM, and have had several meetings just since I took this project. I officially took this project on January 4th of this year. So I've had several meetings with the executives there and with the new project management to discuss the issues that have arisen and that I was able to identify. The other thing I did was to put the technical resources in the car with the operational resources. What I found was previously on this project, the technical resources were making changes or fixes to the system, testing it themselves, handing it off to operational people who would then basically give it a thumbs up or thumbs down that it either was working as we need it to be or not, and handing it back. What we didn't have was all of those folks in a car together testing, so that the technical folks weren't necessarily working outside of that operational picture, but are working together. So I've got operational folks in the car with the technical people so they can see firsthand what the issues are, which I believe will resolve the issues much more quickly than doing that handoff approach that's been going on for the last year. The other thing I did was I went through all of the decisions that have been made on the project from a sense of looking at all of the configuration settings on the system, all of the choices we've made, all of the things that we've asked for it to do, to ensure that, again, we're going back to what's going to work for the officer in the car, and thinking from that perspective and not just from a technical perspective. The other thing I did was I took a step back as far as our testing is concerned, in that a lot of the problems, and I would say not all, but a lot of the problems that were being that were surfacing were really around the integration between the camera in the car, interfacing with the computer in the car, the MDC. And what I asked IBM to do was to disconnect that for the time being so we could test just the camera as it functions on its own, to ensure that all of the issues that were identified with the camera standalone are resolved first. Because if we jump straight to integration with that MDC, we have no way of knowing when we see problems, is it an integration issue with that computer, or is it truly base functionality that is not functioning properly with the camera. So for now, I've asked that that be disconnected so that we can have individuals test that camera standalone, work through any issues that are identified there before we go into that integration testing with the MDC. I think that will help us isolate issues much more quickly, and in fact it has, and will allow us to come up with a resolution with the camera first before we get into that integration. The other thing Councilmember Zine requested was a project timeline for the completion of camera installation. As I mentioned, everything is installed. The problem here is working through the issues that have been identified and getting it implemented. And right now, I am working with IBM to come up with a timeline, identify every issue that's out there, have them give me targeted dates on when each issue will be resolved, come up with a plan for when we are going to have a system that it works as we expect it to work, and then develop a rollout plan. And my intent is to start with Southeast area, get that up, get that right before we go any further. The other thing is that I will not authorize final acceptance of the system until we see all areas in South Bureau working just as the contract requires. While I've separated that connection from the computer in the car for testing purposes, keep in mind that integration into the MDC is a contractual requirement. That doesn't mean that anybody is off the hook. IBM still has to deliver that, but again, I think it will at least aid us in identifying the issues. At some point, I think we'll have to make a decision, and I think part of that will be based on feedback we get back from the officers as far as how do we roll this out. Do we roll it out first with just using that camera standalone without that integration to the computer, use it that way for a while, have officers give us feedback, and then as a second phase, roll out that integration with the computer, or do we wait and do it all together? And I will be actually going back to Police Commission at the end of this month to discuss just that. What I don't want to do is stall this project any longer. I'd like to get it up and running as quickly as possible, but I also am cognizant of the fact that there were very explicit contract requirements that have to be met here, and I personally don't think we should accept anything less than that. As far as next steps are concerned, what I'd like to do is finish that testing, that standalone testing with the cameras. I'd like to roll that out to the senior lead officers in Southeast and get feedback from them on how they believe it's working. I don't want to give it to the senior lead officers in Southeast until my staff has verified that it's working as it should. My goal for the senior lead officers is really to just be another field test to give us feedback on the usability of the system, that type of thing. But I don't want to waste their time with just giving them a system that has problems. I want to work through those first before we hand it over to them. As I mentioned, I am reporting back to Police Commission at the end of this month with the progress and all of those things that I've identified. I am having daily meetings with IBM. Our staff gets together every morning, discusses the issues, comes up with a plan for the day to resolve issues, and then I also have a weekly meeting with executive level staff at IBM as well.
Okay. I understand some IBM representatives here. If I would ask them to come forward, please, if they would.
Yes.
And before I ask IBM to speak, let me ask Maggie, first of all, if we're only looking at the camera as a standalone now without the interface, how are you gathering then the video evidence, the records? How are you viewing them? What's that process now?
It all works exactly the same way in that rather than seeing everything on the screen on that laptop, you see it on a screen that flips down from the camera system in the car. And then as far as doing the wireless upload to the servers, going back into the station to view your video, retrieve it, storage, all of that, works exactly the same. The idea with integration into the MDC was that you'd only have to do things in one place. You're already logging onto that MDC. You should just have to do it once, not have to then go up to a screen on that camera system to log in and do what you need to do there. So that was the goal, was to reduce the steps and things that officers have to interface with in the car. But as far as functionality, everything would work the same.
So it's an extra step for the officers just
Correct.
to get it working.
Correct.
Okay. And then second question before I talk to IBM is how much of the contract has been paid already? Some $5 million, I think. And what was the
The total on the contract was 5.4. We've paid them just under 5.2. And the contract payment schedule was front-loaded, basically, all pertaining really to the installation of the equipment, which was all done right up front. The last deliverable, which is a little over $200,000, is specifically for acceptance of the system, final acceptance, which, of course, we have not done.
It wasn't much of a reserve. I've seen contracts a lot better than that. But I got to tell you, unless IBM talk right now, but for the folks from IBM, Mr. Parks and I, a member of the Budget Committee, were very opposed to this contract in the first place because I didn't think you had the best deal. And it's beginning to look like you don't have the best deal. So what do you say to the delays, the problems, and my charge, and you're going to hear from Mr. Parks as well, that this isn't the best system we could have bought?
My name is Russ Weir. I'm a director in our Contract Performance Management Group in IBM. I run the West Region. I would tell you that in any project of this size or magnitude, you're going to come up with issues or opportunities. I think we've had a good working relationship with LAPD. I think that we have found out in this entire process, as we go through it, we've had to make some changes on assumptions we've made. We've also found out that LAPD in the car does things a little different than other places that we've worked. And that's a good learning process. The thing that I am also here to tell you, though, is we are committed to fulfill our contract. And part of the delays have been in getting it right, putting the right code in place, doing the right level of testing, making sure we understand. And even though some of the things we have done that have passed test, once we've gotten it over to Ms. Goodrich's team, and we really try to look at the functionality that the officer needs, we've had to make some changes. And we're willing to do that and get that done.
What could be that much different between LAPD, Burbank, whatever, and when an officer gets in the car, he signs on to a computer system, an NDT, MDC, whatever. Everyone in the country is using these systems now. You guys support a great many of them. What could be that much different?
Can I give you one example?
Yeah.
One example is most of the cities that are using these are running them in standalone mode. They are less concerned about the ease of use for the officer, and therefore they're more willing to have a couple of multiple logon IDs, separate systems, separate connections, separate things like that. One of the things we observed up front when we were installing is it's very critical to get the correct timestamp on the video so that you can use it for evidence. If you don't do that, then the whole system is suspect. It's nice, but it doesn't count. We were initially building the system to work off the laptops. And what we found is the laptops were not consistently keeping correct time. Batteries die over time. You know, you reboot up, it comes like the VCR 12 flashing all the time.
But when our MDCs connect to our system, they're time dated with the system time date, which is done by our mainframes on a communications to it. That's like automatically updated, is not?
It should be.
When we capture the time, it's just booted and hasn't had a chance to connect, so I'm grabbing 12. That was one of the things we found up front, so we've had to rework the time sync to do something very similar to you, which is go back to the servers, go back to City Hall server, and get the absolute correct time and get it downloaded to the cars. We had that one resolved, and then once we started working with Ms. Goodrich's team, we found out that the officers tend to like to leave quicker from the building before it syncs up. So now we're modifying that again so that we can accommodate them trying to leave. So we've had an opportunity to learn how LA does things a little different, how you operate. Everybody's a little bit unique. And our objective all along is to give the best solution for not only the officers at LAPD, but also for the citizens. So we're hanging in there to complete this project with you guys.
Do you have a response?
To your question about the time sync,
Yeah.
there's the CAD system obviously updates so that all of the recordings, logs as far as what the officer's done, et cetera, are synced with that server. Where IBM was originally pulling the time from was not the CAD system itself, but the actual just little basically time clock on the computer
On the
itself,
Dell.
the laptop
Okay.
itself, which is different.
Yeah. All right. Mr. Cardenas?
Apparently, this contract with IBM was approved in April of 2008. However, when was the policy matter brought forth to the department, where the department understood that cameras were going to be put into their cars?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Sandy Jo MacArthur, Office of Administrative Services.
When was it that the department was made aware that cameras, it was the objective and the policy of the city of Los Angeles to put cameras in the cars?
Well, that actually was being discussed in as early as 2006, when we were working on the consent decree and looking at, we were actually trying to keep it apart and separate from the consent decree, but that is when the discussions started to really come into play. By 2007, the department was definitely wanting to move forward, as was the city family, with cameras in cars. And 2008, we started to do some draft policies on how it was going to work. One of the problems, though, that we had at that time is we did not have end users as part of that team, which is part of what we're trying to fix now.
What do you mean by end users?
People who actually use the product, so the officers in the cars. So some of the problems that are starting to surface right now, we could have probably seen that sooner if we had included the officers who actually are going to use the equipment and the supervisors. This was the same problem, as several of you know, when we inherited Teams. And Maggie Goodrich and I took over Teams a couple of years ago because of the same types of problems. So during the reorganization, one of the things Chief Beck wanted to do was really focus on these problems. In particular, he wanted us to focus on the cameras in cars, which is why we now have an IT bureau headed by Chief Goodrich. So we actually have that single bureau, so that we have one person working for all of these things. But what we've found in the last couple of weeks is that some of the problems that they're trying to fix right now is exactly that. We did not have the right people dealing with the business practices when we were putting it all in place. So I'm not making an excuse. I'm just saying this is the reality where we are today, and we're moving forward. And we do believe that we're going to be able to have some of the solutions very quickly, because we identified that piece that they just talked about regarding the standalone problem, or us wanting to integrate with our system or with our other technology systems, and we believe we will be able to have this up and functioning a lot more quickly, and we can deal with the integration problem later, which I think the city family wants us to start using these cameras as soon as possible.
But this is part of the consent decree, no?
No.
It's not?
That is the biggest piece that we've tried to keep out of the consent decree, because it was never part of the consent decree. It was something that through the consent decree, when we were looking at best practices, the city family identified as a best practice. We actually, as a city in the 90s, identified it as best practice, but the technology was not there, and it was very, very expensive, and the technology continued to try to keep the technology up. And we had actually some cameras in cars at that time after the Rodney King incident. So this is something the city family's been looking at since the early 90s. This has been, the monitor continuously tried to marry this up with the consent decree, and the city family and the police department has tried desperately to keep it separate, because it's a city decision to go forward with cameras in cars, because it's a best practice.
Now, when you mentioned the integration part, is that part of the $5.4 million contract?
Yes, which is why I indicated that doesn't mean that anyone's off the hook for delivering that, but I think we can start with the system standalone while the integration issues are being worked out.
I've been working on IT policy issues for, whether I like it or not, as a policymaker, elected official for over a dozen years now. And it just amazes me. I have so many questions, I don't even know where to start. This isn't rocket science, right? IBM, this is not rocket science.
That is correct. It's not.
What? I guess the most relevant question that I can think of at this moment is, do we have a self-imposed timeline between LAPD and IBM when it comes to the different elements that have not been tackled and the issues that have been identified as to when they will come to fruition, point by point and as a whole?
That's exactly what we are working on right now. We've identified all the issues. I've asked IBM to come back to me with a timeline for when each of those issues will be resolved, and from there, I will report back. And they're working on that. I know they have a draft, but I don't have a final schedule yet.
So are you, when do you anticipate having that?
By the end of the month.
Which is part of the response to this motion by Zion, I presume.
Correct.
Okay. What kept the department from putting that timeline together in the past, or have we had some timelines and we just blew past them and then we just have to start over?
I know there originally were timelines that were not met.
So who takes the majority of the responsibility for that, the department or IBM?
I think it's really a shared responsibility. IBM had questions, and the department's not being responsive to when we would continuously come up with a list of problems. But part of that by the departments is being addressed in the reorganization. So again, Maggie and I were brought in to reconfigure teams and to get the timelines up that were reachable. And we did so, and Maggie was really the heart and soul behind making those things happen, and Chief Beck is confident that the two of us will be able to do the same thing. And we've had some meetings with IBM, and we are convinced that IBM is committed to seeing this project through and meeting the timelines that we are going to have set out, and we hope to have, like Maggie said, we're going to report to Commission the end of the month, and we'll come back to you.
So as far as the department's concerned, the buck stops with you two
Yes.
Correct.
from here forward.
Yes.
Correct.
And with IBM, who's the buck stop with?
It's with me.
What's your name again?
Russ Weir.
Russ Weir. How long have you been on this, Russ?
I got engaged back in late May, early June.
I prefer to say, I hope you're married to this.
If you knew my history, I don't leave a project until it's completed to the satisfaction of the customer.
So May '09 is when you got involved in this?
I got involved late May, early June of '09, yes.
Okay, so I guess IBM has their best man on it, so to speak.
We absolutely do. We have added additional resources since I've come on, additional technical, additional project, and I have very much enjoyed getting to know Ms. Goodridge in this transition. She has understood some of the concerns that we've raised and has immediately taken action on them, and we're very, very pro plan at this point of getting this resolved.
Okay. Well, this is an important issue for the city and the department, and I hope their best man is on it, but I just want to warn you on a personal basis, I was an electrical engineer with HP, and I had to decide whether or not I went with IBM or HP, and I went with HP.
Now you're here.
And now I'm here. But so I tend to be a little critical of IBM. I don't mean unfairly critical, but they're a great company, and it was a tough decision for me. IBM still has a great reputation. But what's more important to me is that how IBM is doing on this project right now.
I agree.
So
100%.
I'll be on top of it. Also, I chair the IT committee, which this item goes through as well. So you're going to see a lot of me.
That'll be good.
Mr. Reyes for one, and then I'll let Mr. Zine make a motion conclude.
A lot of my questions have been answered, and I appreciate the timeline factor. When do we see a calendar of sorts? When do we start seeing actual results and products? Do you have the ability to see that now? Is there a sketch out there of some type?
I do not have that now. By the end of the month, when I report back to Police Commission, I will have a schedule that will indicate exactly when we will resolve each of the issues we've identified. And I am happy to come back here right after that.
When we look at, when it came to realization that we were in real trouble and it just wasn't clicking, things weren't moving the way it was sold to us, because we were taken to cars, you can do this, you can do that. We went through the whole production. And now we're at this place and $5 million on the table. If you look at the gist of the problems, is it more of a mechanical, if you will, or is it more human behavior?
I think at this point they've been technical.
It's mostly technical?
Yes.
And so the procedures for how officers, the protocol that's needed, that's easily dealt with then. I mean, because we heard that there are different departments that behave differently and officers are leaving before they're supposed to, it's not syncing up, and we're hearing all these issues. Is it a procedural or?
I think the key is linking the two. resolving technical issues in a vacuum with just technical people will never make it work for the officers who are going to use the system. I think the key is making sure that both are working together so that when those technical solutions are being designed and implemented, they're going to meet the needs of the officer in the car.
So you literally have to add a chapter to the training book then. I mean, we're talking about from point zero forward, there's a whole new chapter, I'm assuming, of how they behave and how they're thinking as they are trying to give us the kind of data that can stand up in court.
Correct.
And that's what you're working on as well?
Correct. And that's my approach on any technology project. The reason I'm here, an Information Technology Bureau is here, is to meet the needs of the officers. So starting technology without that consideration, without always considering who that end user is a mistake in my eyes. It should always be connected from day one.
And to support that, we actually do have sworn on the team that meet every time we have they are actually assigned to Maggie to work on this specifically.
When we look at technology, we know it's always advancing. There's always new methods, new material, new procedures. Does the 5.2 million allow us to take advantage of any future improvements and or adjustments, or are we within a static place and this is it, 5.2 gives you this and that's it? I mean, are we going to have the opportunity to take advantage of future advancements as part of this money?
I know that the contract allowed for us to receive any upgrades to the software application itself.
It does or it doesn't?
It does.
Okay, thank you.
Just one other before I turn to Mr. Zion and Chief McCarthy, it might be something for you to look at. I don't know about the new MDCs, but the old MDTs, it was not uncommon you'd try and log on and you'd be going out the driveway and you're still not logging on, you're getting system failures, whatever. You could be out driving the streets, still not being able to log on. Technically, you're working, and technically, you're not on the system. And the worst thing could happen is you get into something, you get a call, whatever, and you're not even logged on, or you do a verbal log on. Might be from a training point of view, a good thing is issue a training requirement that says you don't leave the station house, the driveway, until you're logged on, unless the system's down. And then you have to do verbals. But I know, I've done it more times than I want to say, but it's common practice. You just drive out.
And that is actually one of the solutions that we are working out, and I think that solution is fairly good, that it'll do an auto log on in the event we have an emergency. You as a reserve officer have been in that situation where it really hasn't been a choice. You've had to go because of a help call. And so we have a solution that will do an auto log on, so we don't lose that video. And so that is something that actually has worked. And again, we built that one. That's the one thing we did build in properly. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. Our goal is to change the behavior and get people to log on, and to log on before they leave, but understanding that there's going to be that emergency. So we are trying to meet both resources, human and technology resources, come to the right position for all of us as a city.
And that could be a simple e-learning test, you know.
Yes.
Mr. Zine.
Well, I was rather, shall we say, hostile until I saw the assistant chief show up. So I'll be more polite in your presence.
Maybe I should show up more often.
I got great respect for you. Just a couple items. This all generated from the Los Angeles Times article, and we knew nothing about the program other than it was moving forward. We had no idea that it was stumbling. We thought it was on target and everything was going to be completed as scheduled. But back in 1991, after Rodney King's situation, Christopher Commission called for cameras as part of the LAPD. Back in 1991, this is 2010. So I'm not blaming IBM for that, but there's been a long, long haul to get to this point. Departments around the country use it. You know, the TV show Cops and Steven Seagal and all the activities. I mean, this is not new technology. What?
They have a show, The Dumbest Criminals.
Yeah, The Dumbest Criminals.
Get them on TV.
So the concern I have is that we find this out through a Los Angeles Times article. The police department has an obligation, responsibility. Ms. Goodrich, they put you in to fix it. I don't know who was there before, but obviously it didn't work well. Teams 2, we had a similar problem. you folks part of Teams 2?
Yes, sir.
We had a problem with Teams 2, and we had a change in command because Teams 2 wasn't working. Is Teams 2 working now?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, satisfactorily?
yes.
Okay. So my concern on this is, when I read a Los Angeles Times article saying that we're stumbling on something, it's a $5 million project. We've already spent 5.2 out of a 5.4. It's not working. We have civil cases that come before us. Hopefully, the video would clear the officers or show the officers did something wrong. Either way, we have documented evidence because people don't believe people anymore. Others got that on video. So there's a lot of factors here. The frustration that I have is we didn't know about this until the Los Angeles Times article. That's how we find out about it. We think that everything's on target moving forward. So is this going to cost us more than the $5.4 million because it's not working?
No.
Or are we going to stay in that $5.4 million budget?
We are staying in that budget.
So IBM is committed to making this work. If it costs you $10 million in time and energy, and you're only going to get paid $5.4 million, is that correct?
That is correct. We are going to fulfill the obligations we made under the contract.
And that was to have a system that's going to work?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, I thought originally it was designed, when you turn on your red light and siren, it activates the camera. I guess it's become more sophisticated.
That's correct.
Is that how it's supposed to work?
That's one of the triggers that would activate the recording, correct?
Okay.
May I clarify?
Sure.
The camera's actually working all the time.
Okay.
When you actually turn on any kind of event in the car, be it the camera, the siren, or the lights or the siren or anything, it actually goes back in time and captures previous time, so you know what may have triggered the event that you started
Okay.
recording.
Okay.
So the camera's actually operating all the time. It actually starts capturing, though, when you actually trigger an event.
Okay. So that's being done now? And that's just, that part of the system's working?
That part is the standalone that we're talking about.
Okay, the standalone. So with the download, is the download working?
Yes,
Where it downloads to the mainframe?
to the server,
To the
yes.
server? So where's the hangup? Where's the hangup in the system?
Do you want to answer that?
If the camera's working, and the download's working,
Do you want to answer?
what bridge isn't working?
This is the piece about integration. I'll let Maggie go into the detail of it, but this is the piece that we are now working through so that we can be like most other agencies in the country now, but still meet the requirements that the city family wanted us to meet in the future. And Maggie, it's a really fine line, but it makes sense once you do understand this piece of it. So we hope to get it up and running on the standalone piece, but if you can describe it more.
And that's the hangup right now?
Yes.
Yes, yes. And the basic functionality of capturing video, doing that upload to the server, and being able to view your video, yes, it's working. But there are some things that will cause us problems if we don't resolve them. One is that time sync issue that Russ described. We can't have dispatch showing an event occurring at one time and officers' arrest report occurring at another, and video, showing it really occurred 15 minutes later. All of that time has to be synced up. The other issue we're working through right now is looking at the quality of the video that's captured to ensure that we can use this as evidence in a courtroom or in an administrative investigation. Right now we're having trouble when the video when we're switching basically from day to night, capturing video, getting those settings right so that it will automatically adjust as it becomes dusk and into dark. So it's those type of things. That basic functionality of will it record something and will it get onto a server, that's working. But those other things that we have to consider in order to make sure that in the end we can use it for what we need it for, which is capturing that event that we can use in some sort of investigation or prosecution. Working those details out is what we're doing.
Okay, so the main part is, and then the other details you're working through to resolve. Okay, the issue of 300 installed into this $5 million. Once this is done, is the plan then to continue along the same path with the proven system, or are we then going to go out and try something else?
My understanding is council instruction from the beginning on this contract was that we would have it implemented for 6 months, do an evaluation of the system at that point, and then report back to council on how that 6 months, how that has looked, what the evaluation is, and then either recommend that we go forward with a second phase, do another bureau. if we have the funding available, or whether or not another solution it would be recommended. Would depend on how that 6 months would go.
Okay. The, reminds me of the Rover with the help button. The police radios had a help button. It wasn't working, so they disconnected it. What I don't want to see is a system where we disconnect something just because we can't make it work. Because when you disconnect the help button on a police Rover, it really doesn't serve a purpose. But somehow it wasn't working right, so let's just disconnect the thing. The help button in the car, I think they disconnected that too because it wasn't working right, instead of fixing it for the officer's safety. I have a number of other questions that I'm not going to go into, but I am going to make a motion that we receive a monthly report from you, not a designee, but from you, since you're the one who's now got this responsibility, to this committee, giving us a status update and any type of additional costs that we have to pay, and have that also in writing so we can plan that for monthly reports, status update, where we are in getting the South Bureau up and running. And IBM, you're welcome to come join us, but obviously you're the one who's on the firing line to make sure we get this thing done. And since the 90s, 1991 to 2010, it's a long time in coming, and it's still not right. So obviously your reputation's at stake with IBM, and other departments will look to us and say, is it working or is it not working? And we'd like to say, yeah, it's working, IBM is a reputable company, or it doesn't work and IBM is not living up to their contract requirements. And I have a loud mouth, and I have no problem saying it. So, and that's well known. So I'm going to hold these other questions. I just, because I think we got the attention, but it troubles me that we had to read it in the LA Times. Maybe someone from the department should come forward to public safety and say, you know, we have a problem, maybe we can get this thing resolved. But now it becomes a public story, interest story, and everybody's going to be waving flags. And my concern is for the officer safety, for the community of Los Angeles, and the fact is, $5.4 million is a lot of money. If we're ever going to get more money for another phase, I don't know. If you were asking me today, we're not going to be able to do that unless we get a grant or something else. But I think that we're on the right track, at least at this particular stage, to make this project work. That's all I have.
Okay. Any other questions?
And with that motion.
Those are instructions.
So seeing none, we'll, actually, this is just a note and file then, but we then have...
You have a couple of choices, council members. You could continue it and have the report back on a monthly basis
Yeah.
to the filing committee, or you could send the request that Mr. Zine made to council for a report back.
We'll keep it as a live file and request for a 30-day report back.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 5.
Item 5, Board of Police Commissioners report relative to extending for 180 days, the terms of the city's existing contracts with the official police garages.
Good morning, committee members. Richard T. Fank, Executive Director of the Police Commission. I'm accompanied by Lieutenant Phil Hearn, Commanding Officer of Commission Investigation Division, and Detective Ben Jones, the official police garage coordinator. We'd be happy to answer any questions. The report before you is to request the extension of the current contracts for 180 days. The reason for that extension is we're waiting for the ordinance which will adopt new boundaries for the OPGs, in that as we move forward with the contracts, we will have the appropriate boundaries within the contracts. And that is the purpose of this. I understand that hopefully we will have the ordinance completed within a few weeks. Once that is done, it finds its way through the process. We have completed all of our work. We're ready to move forward. We just need that ordinance in place before we complete the contracts.
And that was the ordinance we requested a year and a half ago.
Yes, sir.
Is there anyone from the city attorney's office here?
Mr. Smith, I'm here, and the ordinance is prepared. It's going through the approval process, and like Mr. T-Fank said, we're hoping to get it to public safety, actually, and hopefully in a couple of weeks.
Why did it take a year and a half?
Well, we did have some legal issues, which I'm happy to meet with you privately if you'd like to, if you want further explanation, but we do feel that we've resolved them to our comfort level. And the other is just workload, frankly. We will endeavor to do better this year, 2010. That's our goal.
Mr. Cardenas.
Yes, I was talking to Mr. Smith, who's a lot more versed on these issues, and I was reading this, and I mentioned 18 and 19, and he said, no, it's not 18 geographic areas, and it's not 19 OPGs anymore. What is the accurate number for today?
Today, we have 18 official police garages, sir. That formula had been in place for a number of years, since the last station which opened, which was Southeast.
Police garages are geographic, LAPD geographic areas or OPG service providers?
They currently are official police garage service areas. That's what we want to have in the new writings, because we have 18 OPGs and 21 police areas.
Okay.
So there has been the blend over, and what we don't want to create is every time a new police jurisdiction area would open, it then messes up, quite frankly, the contracts in the service areas. So what we recommended, based on a motion that was introduced by Councilmember Wesson, I believe about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, is that...
February 22nd, 2008.
That's correct, sir. We would keep the 18 service areas, because there has not been an increase in service demand. We are now compressing police service areas. So by keeping the 18 OPG service areas, they would remain consistent. So a contractor has a consistent landmass that they would be responsible for, regardless of what the police department does with new geographic areas and/or adjustment of boundaries.
So therefore, what will be acted upon soon, it will reflect how many areas? Because Greg Smith was telling me 21, and you're moving back to 18.
It will reflect 18 official police garage service areas.
Okay.
Regardless of the number of police areas.
Okay.
And the reason for that was a recognition that these companies invest huge amounts of money in rolling stock. So they'd made 5-year plans for purchasing equipment, et cetera, based on the 18 divisions we used to have. So we're kind of giving them a little slack until eventually we will go to 21, correct? That is.
No, we'll remain at 18.
Eventually?
Yeah.
Eventually?
Yeah, the issue that we face today is when Topanga opened along with Olympic, those geographic boundary adjustments also caused other adjustments in other areas. So we had these contracts that were in place for a number of years, and we worked with the department and the OPG contractors to provide some level of what they were going to lose and what they were going to get in this changeover. With creating official police garage areas, it will not matter what the department does. As to creating the number of jurisdictions, again, we have 21 today, could become 22, 23, or they adjust boundaries.
Okay, so you're going to keep the garage areas at 18,
right?
Regardless of how fortunate we are to open up new police facilities.
That is as we sit here today and speak about that. Clearly,
could change.
Could change.
But that is the objective today.
That's correct.
Is to keep it. But we have temporarily 21 OPG areas, right?
No, we have 18 OPG areas.
Did we in fact have
territory versus police station? Territory.
Yeah, territories. So we had 18 territories. We never moved to 21 territories.
Right. No, we have some OPG servicing multiple police areas.
But officially, there's only 18 OPG areas.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, who knows those boundaries?
I'm sorry, sir?
Other than you. I mean,
and the guys out in the field.
Mr. Smith and I know, obviously, these are the boundaries of Van Nuys, boundaries of Wilshire, and you call for an OPG in that particular area. With the way it is now, someone that gets their car impounded, are the officers now briefed on new maps of what the areas are?
When they opened the last two police stations, it affected 9 areas that were affected by that. And what the OPGs did was they made maps for each particular area, tow area, and little pocket-sized cards that fit into the officers' pockets. They also provided flyers at the station, and they also provide contact information at their windows for customers coming in as to which station could identify each car. They also put on a system that's available to the public and the department that's on the internet. So if your car is impounded, you type in your license plate number, it'll tell you exactly where your car is, what the fees are, and the address to that particular OPG.
And that's run by who?
That's run by the OPG Association.
Do you know the website?
Yes, it's OPGLA.com.
OPGLA?
OPGLA.com. And if you want, I can come to any of you guys and walk you through the website, and it has quite a bit of additional features for the department, for detectives to identify cars also.
Excellent.
Also, if I may, when the officer actually, tells communications where he or she is,
Right.
they already have the database in, so that address will key the appropriate OPG that communications will call.
Okay.
Mr. Reyes?
Yeah, I have two issues that, one is obvious, in District 1 we have 6 divisions, and the actual yards where they are located is overwhelming in my district. So I'd like to see a map of what is currently being allowed, or where are the contracts existing today, and how much space are they taking up in my district.
I'm happy to come by and discuss it with your staff.
But I'd like to take this one step further. There's a couple in particular that are right in the walkways of students coming and going from middle school. The local neighborhood calls it the gauntlet. It's a bridge where the kids get beat up by the gangs. Girls have been assaulted, there have been rapes. And I have an OPG operator who can make a huge difference in these people's lives if he chose to manage his facility a certain way.
May I come by and talk to your staff about
And
that?
so I need it for us to understand that the very same folks we're serving and the police officers we should be helping, our regular operators are not helping.
I would come by and I think we can resolve that.
Okay, so I want to make sure we understand what discretion we have and how we influence our environment. That's one. Two is how they conduct themselves when they have their sales of their vehicles, the kind of disturbance created in these dense pockets, and they really just feel like you can't touch me, I have a contract. And I just want them to make sure they understand that we need to change that relationship.
Mr. Reyes, anytime these issues have come up and I've gone to them with particular problems, they've always done whatever we've requested them to do.
Good.
I'd like to meet with your staff and we can find out what needs to be mitigated and we will make that happen.
I appreciate it. It's been an issue for almost 25 years now.
Do they have an association? They still have an association?
Yes, sir.
Yes, they do. Their president is present in the back of the room.
Mr. Reyes, I think maybe the association could be of assistance with that. I found that in the valley they've been helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Cardenas?
Thank you. What's your name again?
My name is Detective Benjamin Jones.
Benjamin Jones. I'll need your card. Unfortunately, I've had the need to call you, and I didn't even know you existed. Not your fault. Not your fault.
But Lieutenant, remember, Charlie Beck used to have your spot.
Yes, sir.
Now he's chief of police. So there you go. Started out there.
That's right, he did.
But also, you mentioned that the website, et cetera. I represent some of us, such as Reyes and myself. We still have that digital divide in our community where the vast majority of the people in our district don't have a computer at home. They really don't have direct access to that kind of technology. So do we still have like 800 numbers and phone numbers that people can call?
Actually, the OPG Association has asked if the city would like them to form a call center where people who have a Spanish language or any other language that are common in the city of LA, that they could give them that information. We're still looking at how to do that because the question actually comes up, what languages do you staff it with? And
You know, it's great that the association would want to address that in that fashion, but with all due respect, if I had a business in Pacoima, I probably would have people who spoke Spanish who worked for me, who could get on the phone and explain those details or what have you, rather than having to create a third-party system. But I guess some businesses don't have that available to themselves.
I understand that, sir, and Spanish is not the language that we're having trouble with. Almost all of the, 100% of the OPGs have on-duty Spanish speakers all the time. The language that sometimes where it gets a little critical are Korean and some of the other language, Chinese and things of those nature. And those are the languages where we had some discussion about utilizing one of the universities to develop handout material in the 15 common languages that we do the ballots in for people that come in. But Spanish has not been a language that we're having trouble with.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And I also appreciate people wanting to address the issue of communication with everybody. It's pretty traumatic when somebody shows up and their car is gone. You know, first did they steal it, and then they find out that they did something wrong, and then still traumatic. So for us to ease that situation as much as possible, I think that's very important. So if you could give me your card, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Sí, muchas gracias. With that, are there any other questions, concerns? All right, we will then approve the commission's recommendation. We will ask the city attorney to give us that ordinance as quickly as possible, and we'll move that along. That concludes our regular agenda. We have one public comment. Phyllis Doherty. Good morning.
Phyllis Doherty, Animal Issues Movement. I want to bring up something else that you won't read about it in the Los Angeles Times. Not quite as dramatic, perhaps. You know, we have the bulletin out for the new general manager of Animal Services. The position will pay up to $210,000 a month, probably costing $500,000 to do this entire search. The only requirement for the job is California driver's license. The rest of it we would all like. We want to believe in no-kill, which is the death, unfortunately, of the department. And you have to get along with everyone except the city council. You aren't mentioned. You have to get along with the mayor because he can fire you. The Department of Animal Service, this is a world-class city putting out for a general manager of a $19 million budget. I think it's a shame that this is being done in this way. It's obviously strictly the surveys that were done. They've just copied off the wishes of the most extreme people in the humane world. The basic functions of the Department of Animal Services are required by law, by state law, are public safety. It's your third most important public safety agency, and we don't know it until a pack of dogs or a dog attacks you or someone you care about, and then all of a sudden we realize what's happening when Animal Services isn't doing its job. This is not mentioned in here. The only laws that are mentioned are a mandatory spay-neuter, which, of course, our spay-neuter law is not mandatory anyway. It's an incentive. The department is mandated to enforce humane laws, which is the thing that does decrease the number of animals that come into the shelter. Because if people do not think they are disposable, you can abuse them, throw them away, and then just dump them in the shelter. We don't have the impounds in the shelter. We don't have to go through all this. We don't have to worry about our euthanasia, because the people that are not going to care for animals get the idea that there is a penalty, so we don't get one. If we do get it, we take care of it. So this is all a created situation to some extent by not enforcing the laws, which again are not required of this general manager. They have to pick up strays, they have to maintain a shelter, and they have to do licensing. That's the state law. If I could take just a minute. In the article this last weekend, you'll notice that Carl Friedman of San Francisco, by the way, San Francisco SPCA is now going broke. They are facing bankruptcy. King County, which was no-kill, is bankrupt and going out of business. Warren County government needed more common sense. They're going out of business. Brevard County, Florida, no-kill. Shouldn't let the extreme views of some no-kill proponents derail a reasonable agenda, so they're going out. And Clarksdale, Mississippi, their no-kill general manager, they're not going to file charges against. So I want to advise you that we're on exactly the same track that we've been on. The radicals are already threatening, and that's what this is being based on. So I think you have a right to know that whoever we get may only have a California driver's license.
Is that put out by the Personnel Department or by the
It is, and they're used a fulsome...
It is by the Personnel Department?
Well, it's by a fulsome search group.
No,
I guess
so it's not the Personnel Department, it's the consultant?
It's chosen by the Personnel Committee, by the Personnel Department, whoever puts this out. This is the official bulletin.
Okay.
And we had to get someone in Folsom. I guess we don't have anyone qualified in Los Angeles, or we didn't need the money.
Low bid. Thank you very much. That concludes today's meeting.